Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to the new Just Us Speaks podcast. From Just Leadership, I'm your co-host, Lester Young.
And I'm your co-host, Hakeem Crampton. Just Us Speaks podcast is being produced to amplify the voices of directly impacted people, particularly the voices of formerly incarcerated people.
Just Leadership was founded on the principle that those who are closest to the problem are also close to the solution, but too often further from the resources and power to affect positive change.
So on this first season of the Just Us Speaks podcast, we are interviewing leaders from the most recent 2022 cohort of Just Leadership USA's Leading with Conviction Leadership Training Program.
Today, we're talking with Daniel Bullman. Daniel is a public health graduate student who works with justice-impacted individuals to build web of support, particularly in higher education. He's certified community health worker and peer recovery specialist, has been previously recognized by the city of Indianapolis and Ball State University alum associate for his work addressing placemaking, healthcare, asset, and food insecurities in central Indiana. Daniel received his bachelor's degree in applied behavior analysis for Ball State University and is an MPH student with Georgia Southern University, where he's co-chair of the maternal and child health research group. He currently serves as an instructor and justice impacted coach for the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program at Temple University, health data science fellow for the QSide Institute, as well as the board of directors for the Indiana chapter of Society of Public Health Education, overseeing continuous education and certification. Daniel, welcome to the Just Us Speaks podcast. Man, that was a lot, bro. I'm like, got exhausted trying to read all that stuff, man. Well, wow.
Lester, you told me to go out there and get it, so I went out there and got it. You know, what can I say? Just following the leaders.
So what do you think when you hear people read your bio? Like, what does that do for you? Like, does it make you be like, damn, I really accomplished a lot of stuff, or what? How does that make you feel, man?
You know, if we're being honest here, you know, you and I talking, sometimes I hear it and it doesn't sound like enough. I mean, we know it's enough. We know what it's like to put in the work to earn our seat at the table, but be excluded from it, not be able to sit at that table because, you know, all that great stuff you just heard, there's a box I got to check when I walk in the door. And so you know what that's like. So, you know, it sometimes it's exhausting, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we're just thinking about, like, we're in this Just Us Speak podcast. We're just talking about highlighting leaders who have completed the LWC Leading with Conviction cohort. Just reading your bio, brother, I'm truly impressed by your accomplishments, the things you have done, and the continuous impact that you're making in the community, and just being a perfect example of what the Leading with Conviction is all about, and what Just Leadership really stands for, is educating, elevating, amplifying the voices of those who've been directly impacted. And the work that you're doing, man, I'm really impressed by that work and how you're continuously adding value to the educational spectrum of that. So could you just share with our audience a little more about who you are and why you do what you do, man?
Absolutely. So my name's Daniel Bullman. Back in, 2016, I came into conflict with the justice system. Very, very fortunate that I was able to come home just at the end of 2018. So, you know, unlike a lot of my peers that sat in my JLUSA cohort, you know, I didn't have to put in as much time as they did. So I guess with that spirit of tenacity and leadership, I hit the ground running. You know, I was home 2 days and I applied to a community college. And it was there that I first started running into the barriers that people face. You know, even though I was accepted, I wasn't accepted. You know what I mean? Like, I got the acceptance. I was allowed to attend school, but I didn't necessarily feel welcome. And that sort of followed me through my academic career. So that sort of fueled, I guess, my passion for wanting to change that for others, you know, being able to reach back and help others forward and not have to experience what I did. And through that work, you know, funny enough, I interact with other JLUSA graduates who, you know, full circle are like, hey, you know, you'd probably be good for this program. I'm going to recommend you here.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the beauty of just leadership. But then, like, I always, in all of the interviews we have done, I always think about how, like you and I was able to push through some of the most challenging things that was intended to break us. We know that when we look at the prison population nationally, we know and we know the historical understanding of why prisons was made, it was built and continue to be structured in various parts of the world. We know that it was never intended to bring about this type of individuals that we are today, people who have college education, leaders, making tremendous impact into the communities and in the world. The prison wasn't designed for that. So when I think about like you, how did education play that role for you when you walked out? Like you said, you faced the barriers, but you had a tenacity. But just speak about education and why it matters for those who are formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated.
When I look at it, maybe it's not necessarily that book knowledge that I gained.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can spout facts, I can spout statistics, I can, run code, but really at the end of the day, it was those pro-social connections that were built while in school. I met mentors, I connected with faculty members who could look past any kind of, having to check that box, having to explain what I'd done, and they saw my future. They didn't see my past anymore. And then that just, lit a fire within me to want to continue to do more. When somebody else that is doing the work says, "Oh, you're good, you can do this work," it makes you want to move forward with that. And so those pro-social connections and kind of what we had discussed, my work now is in building those webs of support within communities, rather than having the city tell you what your community needs, you telling the city what your community needs is what's important. And so they were doing that for me. They were asking, what do I need to succeed? And so I guess I have taken that, synthesized it, pulled from all these different leaders that I was able to connect with through my academic career to become and develop as a leader that I want to be, to, again, reach back and then offer that to the next generation of folks and hopefully disrupt some of these cycles of incarceration for folks as they're coming home so that it's not being passed intergenerationally to their children, to their grandchildren.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And it just made me think about, like, I just had a recent conversation here because we know that Pell is being reinstated in a lot of places now. Like a lot of colleges, a lot of universities now looking at how they can implement the Pell. But the barrier that I see that most of them are facing is how do we integrate those with felony convictions into schools, and how do we educate staff in how to address and treat people with a felony conviction. That scarlet letter definitely stands out. Like we got these pendants with just leadership, right? So how do you, as someone who's formerly incarcerated now, how do you go about actually educating staff around this particular issue? As someone who's formerly incarcerated, now you have acquired levels of education. You got a better understanding of the landscape, and you're now using your lived experience to actually change the narrative when it comes to that, because you know the barriers that we face with a felony conviction. What are you doing now to educate college staff about why it's so important to create a warm welcoming for those who are coming into the college space with a felony conviction?
So I'm really glad you asked that, because there's two fronts that I'm approaching this in. For one, I'm in a state that's not necessarily welcoming of individuals. I know out west, there are a lot of institutions that are doing amazing work in creating support spaces, support groups, and even branches of their institution to help integrate and support students as they're coming through their college or university. Out here, not so much. So first off, personally, what I do is I don't hide anything. Right off the bat, they knew who I am. All it takes is a Google search. So why I don't need to hide. If I say something that makes you uncomfortable, then that's cool. But just me being in the room, that might be on you. Second of all, though, is one of the big things that I work with is in our work with Temple University and the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. So it's about to have its 25th year anniversary this year. And essentially, it's two things. One, the program itself brings college classes into prisons, or has been doing this, and it mixes outside students or community students from a local university and brings them inside the wall to have a regular college class with folks on the inside. So the folks on the inside are getting college credit, generally, for free from the university that's presenting this course. Additionally, it's a pedagogical model. So what I do as an instructor and justice impacted coach for Temple is we host training development for new faculty who want to be able to teach inside a prison, who want to be able to work with currently incarcerated students. And it's a 1-week training boot camp, essentially, in which we deliver this pedagogical model and also help them understand, here is the population you're working with. And they don't need to be essentially fetishized. These are smart people. Don't be surprised. We don't send a high school teacher to a low performing school and have a high school teacher say, oh, wow, because of your test scores in this school, I'm surprised you're able to understand or do this. We don't do that in any other circumstance. So we're training folks. Don't do that when you get into a facility. And what we're seeing is that, one, these instructors are incredibly surprised by the work that's being put out by the incarcerated students, not because it's amazing work, but because they realize, you and I can jump on the computer and Google whatever we need. We can go over to the library and look stuff up. But if you're incarcerated, you're in your cell. Maybe you got the law library you can jump to. Maybe your facility has a tablet.
Outdated. Everything is outdated.
but you have students that are cranking out papers, that are top notch without having, they're doing it old school, the way, folks were cranking out papers in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And so that, this faculty is like, I'm impressed in that manner that they're able to produce this level of work despite the barriers they're facing. And so what it's also doing is, as those courses become more successful, as the college students on campus are like, oh, we want to be involved in this, we're seeing more advocacy, more allyship, and then actual institutions are like, why not have that person come to our school once they get out? What can we do to support them when they come home?
I think that's important because, through the leading with conviction and just knowing the space that we're in, we know that there's over these 48,000 collateral consequences. And in most cases, we only focus on employment and not really thinking about how higher education has these barriers as well, like ban the box in certain applications, deny you access to go into certain schools because of that, right? So we see that collateral consequences is extended so broad. And a lot of people don't understand that it is a hindrance. So I'm excited to know that Pell is now being reinstated. And now individuals who are in prison don't have to just sit in prison and just be idle. They now have an opportunity with education, you know what I mean? Because that's one way I believe we change the narrative of those who are coming home from prison, and it humanizes them, right? But we know the challenges we face with those and elected officials and community members is that they always, no matter what you do, they still see you as a person who committed the crime rather than a person who have now made another choice with their lives and now they're taking the path to education, So what do you say to these individuals who are very critical in saying that a person who's in prison should not get a Pell? What do you say to these people as a person who has gotten this education now and benefited from it?
I have two approaches to this. One, we call them departments of correction. So do you want the individual to come home corrected? Do you want them to be a productive member of society? Part of that is going to be job training, job placement. And what better time to do it than while they're being, quote unquote, corrected within the state. So we have that aspect. But then additionally, what I would stress to individuals is the greatest predictor of your child's future success is parental educational attainment. And so if we want to break intergenerational bonds, if we don't want someone to come home, can go right back to the environment that may have brought them into conflict with the justice system, not pass that on to kids. We have an answer to that. The data is out there that tells us education can stop that cycle. Education can improve that household's quality of life. Education can set the children of that individual on a path to success. So why would we not want to do that, but then in the same breath say we're trying to stop crime? When we can stop crime, we can improve our community simply by trying to help an individual attain higher education. So when we look at it like that, I think the answer is clear.
Brother, that's a great argument.
Yeah. I mean, we're here trying to be crime fighters. What better way? I don't need 4 cars rolling by my house every 15 minutes. We know criminal justice majors out there. We know that the presence of police has no deterrent effect on crime. But you know what does? Higher education.
Wow.
Just Leadership USA amplifies the power of directly impacted people by investing, educating, empowering, and elevating their voices so they have the tools and resources to self-organize and advocate for themselves, their families, and their communities. Together, we build an equitable, fair, and just US. To date, over 1,400 leaders in 45 states and in Washington, D.C. are hard at work transforming people and communities who are harmed by mass incarceration. Please partner with us to bend the arc of criminal legal reform by donating to our leadership programs today. Our network of leaders is strong and growing. Together, we're building local power for national impact. Every donation supporting JLUSA and our leaders has a ripple effect across families, communities, and generations. With your support, we can continue working together towards our singular vision of a just, equitable future for all. To learn more, go to jlusa.org/give 2023. That's jlusa.org/GIVE 2023.
Another question I have is like going back now, as you said, you went into prison at 2016. What was like, let's talk about that experience for you. Like, you know, we see your accomplishments and all the accolades you're receiving now, but what was that? Who was Daniel at that point in his life at 2016, walking into prison? Did you envision this life for you, or what was going on in your head at that time?
You know, when I walked in, I still had high hopes. I still thought, oh, you know, the process will work, even though the process clearly was not working. You know, I still believed in the system. At some point, the system will work and it'll recognize its wrongs. But when I went in, you know, I found one, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I actually met a lot of good people inside. Some I wish I could still maintain contact, but, you know, a lot of states, because I got to check that box, I'm not allowed to send letters to them, a message to them. And I just look forward to the day they can come home. But I think it was when I came home that I realized you know, those 48,000 collateral consequences broke me. Man, they broke me. Trying to find a job, you know, at one point, here I am, and I'm you know, a mid-level manager for a municipality, and now all of a sudden I can't even get hired to sweep up cigarette butts at the parking garage. Getting a job as a door greeter, that's now the high, that's the goal or the career aspiration, because that's about as good as it gets. And, you know, it didn't take me long to realize it shouldn't be that way. You know, what kind of life is that if you want folks to quote unquote rehabilitate, to be productive again, to move on? You can't keep a roof over your head with a lot of those jobs, those second chance jobs that are available out there. And so that's, I guess, the initial fire that launched me and started my own journey, and what keeps me going now to make sure that other people don't have to deal with that there are options.
What made you keep going and didn't want it to give up? Like, I know what it feels like for rejection. Rejection hurts. Like, I don't care like how tough your skin is. Rejection hurts, especially when you want better for your life and your rejection is only based upon because you have that felony conviction. Like, what were you doing internally to keep yourself moving forward in spite of all the rejections? Like, they're telling you can't even sweep a cigarette butts, right? What was that thing you had to do internally that got you through, not just for when you got out of prison, but help you survive prison from 2016 to 2018? What was that thing, man?
So the big thing is my spouse now. At the time we were dating, you know, but I met an amazing person who believed in me. Again, those pro-social connections. And a lot of the folks that I did meet on the inside didn't have that. You know, when I say I'm very fortunate, I came home to someone who loved me, a roof over my head, you know, who could help as I was starting to rebuild. A lot of the guys we know are coming home to not that. They're going to a halfway house. They're going to work release. And then as soon as that's over, they've got to find an address, you know, or they're going to get violated on probation or parole. You know, that's their options. And so they're going to have to pick, and, you know, they can't be picky. They're going to have to take whatever they can get. They're going to have to beg. And so when I say I'm very fortunate, I recognize that I had that for me. And so that's kind of what kept me going. When I came home, though, I'm going to be honest with you, I was probably motivated by the wrong reasons. You know, I thought, you know what, when I started my academic journey, I was like, they might call me a mope, but they're going to call me Dr. Mope at the end of this. And, again, wrong reasons, a different place now. But in the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm doing this out of spite. I'm 100% doing this out of spite.
But that's the motivation sometimes. Like for people walking out of prison, sometimes you gotta I'm going to prove you wrong.
Right.
I believe finding anything that would set that flame on fire for you to keep you moving, and I think that, when we look at those who are getting out of prison and unfortunately returning back to prison, they didn't find that thing. Right. They didn't find those social connections that believed in them. And it's something as simple as having someone say, hey, man, I see you and I respect you. I see that you have the skill and the gift for higher education. I see that in you. Just those words of affirmation and affirmation can push an individual who's been beaten down by rejection after rejection and incarceration. Those things could give someone life. And I'd be like, yo, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. You know what I'm saying? That was my motivation when I got out of prison, because people, when I had these big aspirations, people feel like, oh, yeah, you just another one of these guys talking this big talk. You're going to get out of prison and you're not going to do none of that. So initially for me too, I can admit, like, yo, my thing was I'm going to prove all of you wrong.
Right.
And that kept me moving forward. And you got to find that thing that keeps you moving, man. So thank you for sharing that. Another thing is just wanting to understand, like, we want to always highlight how important it is for leaders to take care of themselves. Like self-care, we see, like, especially getting out of prison, being in prison, it is not a lot of time invested in self-care because you're in survival mode, right? And you walk out of prison and you're still back in survival mode, trying to find a place to live, get reintegrated back in the family, the world. What did Daniel Bullman do for self-care and all of the things you're doing now? What does self-care look like for you, man?
In the beginning, there wasn't. Like you said, it was survival mode. You're coming home from the war and you can't turn it off. And that in itself was exhausting. And then, when you're meeting all these barriers and everybody says no, you start finding yourself saying yes to every single thing that somebody does toss your way. When somebody's like, here's a couple crumbs, you're like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do this. I'll just to get back out there to start doing things. And, in the beginning, I was burning the candle on both ends. I was splitting it in half and burning it, 4 ways. But I realized that really quickly that I was setting myself up for failure, not just myself, but my family, because if I'm out here doing all this in an effort to build something for my family, what is it worth if I'm not there for them? Does my kid care that I gave a talk somewhere, so I could score a couple bucks? No, they want to go play at the playground. That costs me nothing. We can just walk across the street and go do that. And so pretty quick, I found that I needed to set up boundaries. I had to set up work emails to where they're not coming to my phone. I had, so as soon as I turn off, I'm sorry, I'm off. You're not going to get a reply. Prioritize my family, prioritize the things we enjoy doing, because, it sounds very live, laugh, love of me, but, it's the memories that matter. And those are memories that were taken away from me, time that was taken away from me, those 2 years that I was gone. So why am I going to waste it spreading myself thin and just essentially putting myself in another prison and not being there for my family when I sat there and just told you that for 2 years, my family is what kept me going. So, that was what I had to do.
We are so excited to invite you to the Just Leadership USA 9th Annual Benefit Gala, Monday, June 5th, 2023, at PhD Rooftop Lounge at Dream Downtown in New York City. We're excited to bring JLUSA leaders, allies, and advocates together in person to unite around our shared values and propel our vision for the future. During the last year, we've made significant strides in building our capacity and infrastructure to become the only national systems change movement and policy table led by and for directly impacted people. This coming June, please join us for our first in-person celebration in over 2 years. Learn more at jlusa.org/gala. That's jlusa.org/GALA.
Well, listen, man, we're about to wrap up in a few more minutes. And I really thank you for this time you sharing with me. And I definitely learned something from you as well. And that's, man, those boundaries. Having boundaries in your life, man, like you said, when you're coming home from prison, it's about how I'm going to take anything. I'm going to say a whole lot of yeses and less nos. And sometimes that creates that burnout for you, especially for a formerly incarcerated person. I see that happens a lot. Individuals come home, they want to get into the speaking, they just want to tell their story, and they're telling their stories with a lot of yeses. And it's like they're pouring out and no one else is pouring back into them, right? So that takes away from them. They're traveling and not getting paid for it. And that's something that we definitely got to change. And one thing I love about Just Leadership as well, what we emphasize to our leaders is like, yo, if you say a yes and you're sharing a story, make sure that you're going to monetize that story, that there's going to be some benefit for you other than you traumatizing yourself again, telling that story, and then you walk out of there with a t-shirt, right? So leaders, like that's not leadership. It's nothing wrong with giving, but making sure that you're not being exploited for someone else's benefit and you're not doing it. And sometimes we do it out of guilt. 5 years from now, where do we see Daniel? 5 years now, for all of the work you're doing, 5-10 years now, what is that leadership goal for you?
Lester, I wish I could tell you that we'd be sitting on a yacht together at some point, just chilling, that's I guess that's the dream. But the reality is, I'm still going to be here, right here in Central Indiana. I'm going to keep doing the work I'm doing, because when I talk about the barriers and the things that I face here, the answer I get from everyone is head west. Washington's better. California's better. You'll make it out there. Mm-hmm. That's not what I want. I want people to be able to make it here. This is my community. This is where, we have set our roots. I want it to be a better place for my kids. I want it to be a better place for the people coming home. And I want it to be better for their kids. And so, leaving is not an option. I'm not going to abandon, my home just because it's done me wrong. Instead, I want to change the policies, the processes, so that it does people better, so that they don't have to go through the things that the people of the past did. That's the only way we move forward is inclusivity.
That's good, man. And that's going back again to leadership. You remember in the LPI, I was your coach there, and we used to highlight about that shared vision, that inspired shared vision. That's what you have, is that you want to see people live a life that does not have to live with the barriers and live in shame. Also, we talked about, what's that, model the way. You're doing exactly all of those things that we covered in our LPI, which is called the Leadership Challenge Practice, is modeling the way, inspire shared vision, enabling others to act, challenging the process. You're definitely challenging the process by pushing through the barriers, and most importantly, encouraging others to act. So those are the 5 practices. And I definitely love that I met you at the start of the LWC training. And now I'm seeing you after graduation and months later, and see that you are displaying all 5 of those practices in the manner in which you do, man. So I'm truly proud to have you on this show, but most importantly, to be a person that saw your growth as your coach in this, and you doing some phenomenal work right now, man. So just continue. I always want you to tell you this, man. Don't be too hard on yourself. Like, celebrate your accomplishments and take time to breathe, because, man, like I said, in seeing you now and hearing you speak about where you at and why you do what you do, it makes so much sense now in how your LPI was set up, and then to see the growth just from talking to you, the LPI. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we conclude?
2 things come to mind. So we touched on it earlier. For our listeners, justice impacted or not, if you're an ally, if you're asked to speak and you're sitting on a panel, it's okay to ask those panel members how much they're getting on that honorarium, because if yours is 0 and it was never mentioned, that's a problem. Everybody else at that panel is getting paid. I promise you that. If they got an alphabet after their name, they're getting paid to sit there. And second, if you're a justice impacted individual and you're thinking about applying to cohort, do it. Because Lester can tell you, when I came in, I was a paperwork man. I was like, if we're gonna go protest, I can arrange buses. I can make phone calls and get them paid and process some payroll or whatever we need. And now I'm like, nah. I mean, I'll still do that. That is my forte. I'm still good at it. But I just think working with Lester, working with my peers, and being in that space with other leaders has helped me realize there's more to it, and that shared vision is huge. And that, I think, inspiring a shared vision was my weakest score in my LPI. And just in the course of that year, I'm able to now say what it is I want for my community, and then also get folks on board with driving forward with that. So, if you're thinking about applying, just do it.
Glad that you point that out, man, because see, a lot of people don't understand the value of the LPI as you're going through the Leading with Conviction training. But like you said, you identify that was one of your low areas in communicating what that inspired shared vision was. And it was a little hesitation in the beginning, like, what's going on? But now listening to you, you're seeing the growth yourself, and I'm listening, watching you and seeing that growth where you're talking about what that is, and you're articulating that very well about how I want to see this. I'm not going to run to the West. I'm going to stay here in Indiana, and I'm going to work because I'm going to challenge this process, man. So thank you, my brother. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Continue to push forward. You know that you're always a part of the Just Leadership family. Continue to use that family, network with that family, continue to grow with that family, continue to share information with the family, because the only way that we will continue to change this social narrative about those living with felony conviction is that we have to continue to network together and share information. Thanks, brother. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time out to listen to the Just Us Speak podcast. I'm your co-host, Lester Young. You all have a blessed day. Peace.